Hello everybody, this is the BG, and today we're going to talk about how to cure and smoke your own ham at home. So this video makes up the first step of a 5-part video sequence where we're going to discuss the 5 most common cuts of pork that are going to be cured, and then some of them are smoked. The reason that we're breaking these videos into 5 different pieces is because they're all cured roughly the same way. There's only 2 recipes that I use. The first 2 videos, the ham and the ham hocks, are hot smoked. The third video, which is pea meal bacon, is not smoked at all. It's only cured. And then the fourth and the fifth video are the bacon and jowl bacon segments, and those are actually cold smoked. The reason for doing the hot smoking first is because it is the least dangerous of all these methods. When we move on to the bacon, which is cold smoked, that's when actually the danger level increases, because if cured improperly and smoked improperly at the wrong temperature, you have a risk for botulism, which I do not want anybody to get, by doing this at home. And so there needs to be a great deal of care involved in the curing process and the smoking process when we get on to the cold smoked products.
For equipment, you'll need what you see here: knives and cutting board, aluminum pans, bowl and spoon, pink salt 1, kosher salt, and organic dark brown sugar, a digital scale, disposable gloves, a meat slicer, a Jellyroll pan and wire rack, VacMaster bags for vacuum sealing, and for smoking your ham, you'll need apple wood.
Although any part of the hog can be cured, for the ham portion, we're going to focus purely on the back end of the hog, which makes up the hindquarters. The whole piece of ham is actually a very large cut of meat with a bone going through it. I personally have never cured that size of a chunk of meat. I always break it down into smaller pieces. And so for me, what I'll do is I will debone the ham, which I haven't shown here, and then take that 12 to 16 pound chunk of meat and break it down into several 2 to 3 pound chunks of meat. So in this video, I just have one section of the deboned piece of ham, and then I'm going to cut it into a couple 2 to 3 pound pieces. So the first step to curing meat is actually to create the cure mixture. And just like my sausage recipes, I do everything in 10-pound batches. What I'm going to give you the recipe for is for 10 pounds right now, but if you wanted to make 40 pounds of ham, you just need to multiply this by 4. But what I'm using is actually the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service ratios for these different ingredients. And so that's the FSIS. And what I got this from, is also from the USDA's website, but also from an excellent book. It's called Meat Smoking and Smokehouse Design by Stanley, Adam, and Robert Mariansky. It is, if you're going to have a single book on just the discussion of meat curing and smoking, it is amazing. But what we're doing here is I need to get a precise amount of sodium nitrite into this cure mixture along with kosher salt and then sugar, and I'm using brown sugar in this case. What I want to use for this recipe is, based on the FSIS requirements, is 200 parts per million of sodium nitrite. What that works out to be using pink salt or prog powder number 1 is 14.51 grams for 10 pounds of meat. And then 102.06 grams of Morton's kosher salt, or actually any salt since you're using it by weight, and then 102.6 grams of dark brown sugar. For my ham recipe, I use an equal amount of salt and sugar. For the bacon recipe, I'm using 2 parts salt and then 1 part sugar so that it's less sweet. I want the ham to have a little bit of sweetness to it, and I want the bacon to have very little sweetness to it. So once you put all of those ingredients into a bowl, you're going to mix them very, very well by hand. And I actually put a glove on my hand just to make it easier. I don't want to get it dirty. And then one extra note to add for the sugar is that I use dark brown sugar, and I'm also using organic dark brown sugar. I've found that the organic dark brown sugar actually mixes better and holds the ratio in place better, because if you're using just regular white sugar, then as you're taking stuff out of the bowl, things are going to settle versus the salt and the sodium nitrite and so forth. And so you want to have all those ingredients in ratio and suspension throughout the entire cure mixture. And just having a little bit of the molasses from the dark brown sugar kind of act as a binder, it holds everybody in ratio better. The reason that I'm using 102 grams of salt and sugar for this recipe is because that works out to be a ratio of 2.25% salt by weight, which after much trial and error, I have determined that's how much salt I want to have in my either bacon or ham. I actually started at 5%, just not understanding what the salt ratios needed to be for it, and that's incredibly salty. And then I backed it down to 3%, that was still too salty. Went down to 2%, not salty enough, and then bumped it up to 2.5, was a little too salty, and then back down to 2.25. So I've already done a lot of work for you in determining how much salt I want to have, and I hope it's the same for everybody else. So now that we have the meat ready and the cure mixture ready, I'm going to describe to you what I'd like to call the weigh it, shake and bake it, seal it, and chill method for doing this. The internet is literally the wild west of people describing how to cure chunks of meat, and quite frankly, most of them are dangerous. Since I've gone through a great deal of hassle to correctly weigh out the amount of sodium nitrite in this mixture, it would be much better to make sure that I actually weigh a chunk of meat and figure out how much cure rate mixture do I actually need to put in with that chunk of meat to get it to cure over the week. And so for this, I'm going to weigh each piece of meat, or a couple lumps of meat together if the bag's big enough, and then figure out how much cure goes in for each piece. And then what you're going to do is add 21.86 grams of cure mixture for every pound of meat. So if you had 1 pound of ham, you would be adding 21.86 grams of the cure mixture to the ham. So what I do now is I will make the bag, seal one end, make it a little bit bigger than I would normally do for something I'm going to put in the freezer. I'll seal one end, put the meat in, measure out how much cure goes in it, put that in the bag, do a shake and bake, and then get the bag flattened back out again, and then actually vacuum seal it. You will get awesome results by doing that, and also you don't have to worry about having to do anything to the meat throughout the week. If you just put the meat in a Ziploc bag, what will happen is that you need to go in at least once during the week and actually rotate the bag around and get it, get the cure mixture to move around. For most of these cuts, you need to have the cure on the meat for 7 days for every inch of depth in that chunk of meat. So for a piece of ham that's 2 inches thick, it's going to take 7 days to actually make it 1 inch from both sides. So you can go up to a 2-inch piece of meat. For bacon, since it's most likely less than 2 inches, 7 days is perfect. If you have a much larger piece of meat that you're curing, you need to actually measure it and figure out how many days it's going to take to actually penetrate that. So if I had a 3-inch chunk of meat, I'm going to let that sit in the fridge for a week and a half to make sure that the cure actually makes its way through all of the meat. You'll definitely tell when you get to the point of actually cooking it and slicing it, because if the cure didn't make it all the way through the meat, then you won't see the pinkness of the ham. You're going to see pink on the outside, and then at some point in the middle, it's going to go back to the gray of just what like a pork chop would look like after you cooked it. After you put all the meat in the fridge for a week, then you're going to take it out and rinse off the cure mixture really well, and then actually pat it dry. And if you want to, you can actually put the meat back in the fridge in a pan elevated on a grate and let it sit there for another day if you want to. It helps drying out the outside of it. When you're smoking something, especially if you're hot smoking, the reason that smoke sticks to the meat is because the outside has been dried off, and it actually forms something called a pellicle, which is like a sticky matte finish to it. So especially if you're doing something by hot smoking, you want to make sure that the meat is very dry before you put it in the smoker. So now that the meat is ready to put it in the smoker, we need to talk about what type of wood to use. For me, I'm a traditionalist on this. I prefer using applewood the most for making ham and bacon. If you like hickory, go ahead and use hickory or cherry or peach or whatever you would like. It's just for me, I prefer using apple. And so in this case, I'm going to have applewood chunks in my electric smoker. And then I'm going to be doing 3 rounds of smoke that are all about an hour and a half long. And then I have the smoker set temperature-wise at 180 degrees. At 4.5 hours, the meat will not be fully cooked. It will probably only be at 140 degrees, maybe 150 degrees. If you wanted to just simply smoke and stop there, you can do that and then package the meat. What I'm going to be doing in this video is actually taking the meat out, putting it in a pan, and baking it to make sure that I'm getting to at least 160 degrees on the internal temperature of the ham. So after the 3 rounds of smoking, the ham is going to become a delightful amber-colored chunk of smoky goodness. But depending upon how big the piece of meat is, it might not be up to the internal temperature that we need to be safe. What I'm looking for is 160 degrees in general for these types of products. And so you need to take a thermometer, check it after you're done smoking it to see if the chunk of ham is at 160 or not. If it's not, it needs to go into a medium-sized aluminum pan like I'm showing. Do 2 layers of foil, wrap the holy hell out of it, and then put that in the oven at 225 until you get to 160 degrees. For these pieces, it took about 45 minutes to an hour for all those chunks to get up to 160 degrees. But that's what we're looking for, is each piece of meat needs to be clearing 160 degrees. So after the pieces of ham come out of the oven or the smoker, depending upon how far you're going, you can stop there if you want to. These, become great dinner hams to have. And the only thing you need to do is when you take it out of the freezer after it's been packaged, you need to bring it back up to at least 160 degrees. My favorite method of doing this for my New Year's Day ham is actually cooking the ham at 190 degrees in the oven for like 12 hours. It makes it super, super, super tender, and all the fat renders off, and it's just delightful. One other thing you can do if you don't want to just have whole chunks of ham to cook for dinner is to actually slice this. So every year I make sure that a portion of the ham that I make actually gets sliced into deli ham we can use for sandwiches. But the only thing I'm doing is I happen to have a deli slicer at home since I do a lot of this. And I found an old Hobart model like this on Craigslist for 130 bucks. I picked it up, took the whole thing apart, cleaned it, checked all the wiring, sharpened the blade. Thing runs like new, even though it's like 60 some years old. Excellent product, and Ohio proud. One thing to note, if you're making ham at home and making bacon at the same time, is that I'm always going to do the cooked products first. This thing I have completely sanitized. I bleached the hell out of it before I even do this. Wipe everything down, take the whole thing apart. And I will do the cooked products before I do the raw products. So right now I'm slicing ham. I'll take the whole thing apart, sanitize it, and then I'll move on to doing sliced bacon that will show in the 4th and the 5th video. The last step that I have for the sliced ham is just making sure that all of the pieces of ham look good. Depending upon how the chunks of meat were cut off of the bigger piece of ham, you can have, sinewy pieces or, fat pieces that you don't want to have in the ham. So once you slice all the pieces, you want to go through them all by eye and just see if there's anything that you don't want to have in the overall ham product. The one thing that you get when you buy deli ham in the store is that those pieces have actually been basically ground and then reformed into a big loaf and then sliced, and so you never really see any of the real connective tissue that makes up the ham, because that's all been just mixed together and homogenized when you buy deli-based ham. The last step is packaging the ham up to put in the freezer. So if you're doing the whole chunks of ham, you can simply just follow other videos where we show about how to do vacuum sealing, and then cut a piece off of the roll, seal one end, roll the other edge over, put the meat in, seal it up, then you're done. If you're doing the sliced ham like this, you can actually buy preformed chunks of the roll that actually have a Ziploc side to them, and so that way you can just roll over the other side, put however much ham in, a half pound or a pound of it in, put it in the bag, vacuum seal the other side, and now you have basically a deli package of ham that can go in the freezer. And then when you take it out to defrost, you can open it up on the Ziploc side, and then use it throughout the week and put it in your fridge. But there you go. The reason that you would want to make ham at home is because it tastes way better than the stuff you buy at the store. And it's not that difficult. If you have a smoker already and you don't want to do the sliced ham, you're good to go. You just need to cure it and then put it in the smoker, package it up, and then you're done. If you want to be more adventurous, buy yourself a meat slicer. If you're going to get into this kind of stuff and be a charcuterie master, buy a meat slicer, buy a smoker, get it all. Get a giant stainless table too while you're at it. So this is the BG, keeping it square. Next time we're going to talk about how to make ham hocks.
Thanks for watching today in the midst of this pandemic. This is fun, right? That's what we're having. Fun, right? Hang in there all. If you're finding yourself struggling for guidance on how to cook at home, check out our videos like how to make scrambled eggs and how to make guacamole. And hey, maybe this is the perfect time to expand your skills and learn how to make homemade chicken broth or applesauce. Or maybe it's the perfect time to just watch vicariously and hope this is all over soon. It's probably not going to be though. Regardless of why you're here, we're glad you're here. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube so we can reach our goal and start broadcasting live, and also check out our website. See you next time on
Our Final Freezer. It's a pandemic. Keep calm and make ham. Keep calm making ham. Pandemic.
If you got to choose between ham and bologna, which one would you eat?
Bologna.
Oh no.
Why the ham crossed the road?
Why?
Because he was so hammered.
Okay.